Hi everyone, I'm Madeline Park, stylist and vintage fashion hound. I believe everything has a story, whether it be clothes or the people that wear them. For season 2 of Style Stories, I want to get out of the house, but find a place where I still felt at home, like Lucio's, the iconic Italian restaurant known for its colour and charm. My guests tip their hat to Lucio's by seasoning their stories with a taste of art, food and family, but always bringing to the table their unique sense of style. Today I'm chatting to Stavroula Adameitis, artist and designer better known by her moniker, Frida Las Vegas. Hailing from Adelaide, Stav's kitsch and clever designs are personal hallmarks of her history and offer nostalgic references to her beloved Oz-traliana. If Chico Rolls, Passiona and the much-shunned bin chicken resonate with your Australian sensibilities, you'll be sure to glean joy from Stav's bombastic designs. It's hard to separate Stav from Frida, but either way she wears her heart on her sleeve and exudes a delicious self-confidence we'd all like to get a taste of. Hi Stav.
Hi, how are you going?
Good, thank you so much for joining me at Lucio's today. It's very fitting that we're surrounded by art. Being an artist and designer, you've been dubbed the modern Kendone.
Oh God, that's an amazing dubbing.
It is, but truly deserved. And the reason for that is because, you obviously have heroed in your work, as you call it, Oz-traliana, late 80s and 90s references. Obviously, they're very nostalgic for your audience, but getting into your story, I assume that a lot of your work comes from direct references from your own childhood. Is that fair to say?
That's absolutely the case. I'm very much, memory is something that really drives me, and I'm perpetually inspired by the scraps of memories I dredge up from my early childhood years. And they always surprise me, but I grew up in Adelaide in the late 80s and the early 90s. So I was very much, I was an artistic kid. I loved drawing. I loved art. That's so many kids do, but I was very tapped into the pop cultural sphere, and I didn't really know it at the time, but I used to watch a show called Video Hits, which was like the MTV of the 90s, and I found myself attaching onto like the George Michael video clip for Too Funky, and seeing some
Didn't we all
factories.
go like those supermodels? Like
that film clip, honestly, I remember watching that and going, all right, A, I want to be Linda Evangelista when I grow up. Yeah. B, I want to have a whole wardrobe of Terry Mugler when I grow up.
A corset with, the rear view mirrors on the side.
Oh, absolutely. C, I want to have a shower with a blonde switch and a lace Mugler catsuit. Like, for me, those little moments, I really paid attention to those moments. Yeah. And maybe other kids around me did too, and they just forgot. But for me, as I grew older, those memories became stronger and stronger and stronger. Yeah. And the things that I would eat, things that, I have a Greek background, so my bapu, which means grandfather in Greece, he would come and pick me up from school every day, and he'd bring a can of Sunkist and a little trifle. Yeah. And we'd go to the deli, which is the South Australian word for milk bar, and every day he'd pick me up, we'd walk home, and we'd go past the milk bar and just ogle all the treats at the milk bar. And for me, that was just such an act of love and caring. And so now the food from that time, the concept of the milk bar, they take on these sort of magical totemic properties for me.
You're absolutely right. I don't know if it's, I've got a Greek background as well, which I kind of shared with you when we were introducing ourselves to each other, but my yaya would come and pick me up, and, that the Greek grandparents, in their world, this idea of no sugar in a children's diet was not in their dictionary of how to look after a child. So I would get a big bag of what we now kind of associate with Alan's party favourites. Oh, yum. And, the strawberries and cream, the bananas, all of that kind of stuff. And feeding was love, wasn't it?
Oh, food was love. And look, if I could, I'm surprised that I haven't made a textile print devoted to the food of my grandparents, because when you think of Greek food, you think souvlaki, Greek salad, chips. But for me and my childhood experience, every single day after the sun-kissed and trifle, my grandma would hand-cut potato chips, fry an egg, and have on the side with tomato sauce, and maybe twice a week hand crumb and pound chicken nuggets.
Oh, yeah.
So it was like chicken nuggets and chips, like what they thought was Australian food that they, deep fried in oil and did their sort of European version. Those things they're really special. And, we'd sit there and watch The Bold and the Beautiful at 4:30 p.m.
Yeah.
And, I didn't realise at the time just how much of a time capsule that space and that age and that time really was. And it's only now as an adult and feeling the pressures of adulthood and, everything that comes along with growing up, that my mind goes back to those precious memories, and I find that so inspiring. And I really wanted to tell those stories, that story that I knew, with fashion as my medium.
And it's funny you say that, because in one of your interviews I've read you sharing a story about you going to school in a pink Barbie jumper with a big spangly earring and kind of getting a little bullied for it. And your response, I feel like, is like the perfect kind of line to start this interview, which was, "But isn't life a fashion parade?" So as a child, is that how you took fashion on, as something that was quite costume-like and theatrical, or...?
Absolutely. Fashion is something that... Actually, maybe fashion's not the word. Style was something that it was a fun sense of play to me. I didn't see it as something that was a tool to use to impress boys, for example, or to pretend to be something that I wasn't. It was a make-believe that was very much grounded in play and imagining characters and dressing up as those characters and strutting on the street and feeling good. I mean, besides this infamous Barbie jumper that I wore to a school photo and was apprehended for. Actually, a couple of years later, there was another offending Barbie tracksuit in year 2 that I would always wear, because our primary school didn't have a mandatory uniform.
Right.
And this one particular young girl in my class, I'll never forget this, she came up to me at recess and said, "So, do you know that your parents spend lots of money on that Barbie brand name? Like, do you know how hard they work to buy Barbie things for you just so you can wear Barbie and feel like Barbie?" I was crushed. I immediately started crying. I felt so much guilt and went...
And you're Greek. As if the guilt is not enough.
I mean, Greek's like guilt's a national sport with the Greek background. But, this little girl, she really was saying to me, "Your parents toil to be able to buy this Barbie tracksuit for you." And I broke down in tears. And my teacher came into the room and she saw what was happening and she asked what was going on. The little girl told the teacher. Her name was Mrs. Hodge, bless her soul, and she gave me the enabling that I needed. And she said, if this is what someone else wants to wear, that has nothing to do with you. What her parents buy for her has nothing to do with you. Meanwhile, I think the tracksuit was from Target. Like, we're not talking Versace here. But this,
it wasn't some designer collaboration.
No,
for children.
It was like,
that didn't exist in our day.
Absolutely not. It was like a 90s, polar fleece tracksuit that had Barbie written on it. It wasn't that expensive, but she made me feel like it was, and that fashion was associated with price and price alone. And the fact that my teacher stood up for me and went, "You cannot tell another human being what to wear. Like, that is not your prerogative. It is everyone's right to wear and express themselves as they feel they should." And that was it. Like, I was like hot pink jeans. I had an Oshkosh bagosh, like a hat that had a big flower in the middle.
Oh, yeah, very girlfriend.
Totally blossom. People would tease me, but I didn't care.
Yeah.
And I had fun. And I thought it was fun. And I could see that when people were teasing me, that it was a reflection of them, and it actually had nothing to do with me.
But it takes a certain self-confidence to even as a kid, to go, right, I'm going to be a little bit different, and that's fine because it feels like me, and I love it as a form of expression. And with or without your teacher's kind of support in that one moment, it still takes some guts to kind of be that kid.
Absolutely.
So were you a strong-minded, self-confident little girl?
You know, I was quietly confident, but I was shy, and I wasn't really. I was very sensitive. Like, if you'd say anything, I would cry at the drop of a hat, as I just mentioned. Like, I was very sensitive.
Yeah.
And my mum and my dad were very, like, pragmatic and said, you really have to toughen up. Like, this world is out to get sensitive people. So you have to really see. You have to see reason, and you can't flip on an emotional switch every time.
Yeah.
Which I felt was maybe not the best advice in hindsight, but I know what they were getting at. And I think it was just the confidence that I had inside that was, it was natural, and it was something that I just thought everyone has the right to be themselves. I'm not telling anyone else that they should not wear Chicago Bulls caps just because that's what everyone else is wearing at school right now, or, you know, who am I to tell anyone what to do? So why should they tell me what to do?
Yeah.
I found that sort of tolerance natural, and I guess I just had a thick skin and went, as long as I'm having fun in my own universe, then it doesn't really matter what anyone else thinks.
And in terms of your family network, was that they kind of your parents? I don't know if you've got siblings, but did they kind of support you and just be like, Stav, you do you, girl? Was that the kind of the attitude? Or?
Yeah, I think so. I think my family knew that they had a quote unquote arty girl with a capital A and a capital G in the house, and so they never really discouraged me. I think they knew. And to be honest, my dad's quite eccentric, and he's a musician, and my mum loves fashion, so it was probably not like
that much of a departure from who they were.
That's it. Like, my dad was in a band in the 80s, and, you know,
what kind of music did he play?
Oh, they played like Beatles-esque pop music.
Oh my God!
When it was
Beatles,
not cool.
I was obsessed with the Beatles. And
well, they actually had more of an ELO vibe because they had a cello in the band.
Oh,
and
amazing!
They had a #1 hit in the early 80s. They were sorry, Dad. They were one-hit wonders.
What was the band name?
They were called Vertical Hold.
Okay.
You can look them up on YouTube and see some hilarious photos of my dad with a mullet and a bad Roxy Music imitation suit in the clips. But they were on Countdown, and, you know, my dad pushed against the Greek culture, and that was not cool to not be a doctor or a lawyer, and in the 70s to pursue music and to actively pursue having a band as a viable creative business. So in some sense, my dad set me on the right course.
Yeah.
And he used to say to me, you know what you never want to be when you grow up? Just never be mediocre.
Yeah, right.
Like, whatever you do, don't be mediocre. So I was encouraged.
And I was going to ask you about that because, you know, often in Greek families, without stereotyping people, there is this kind of conservative idea that you do, you know, a professional job, especially if you've got the ability and the means, and that, you know, everyone's worked really hard to get you where you need to go. So how else did your kind of, other than food and your dad kind of actually pushing against the grain a little bit on that mentality, how else did you think your Greekness kind of influenced you as a kid?
I think it was the sheer glamour of my relatives.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not sure if you remember during this time, but remember how weddings in the 90s, like, they were a big deal.
Yeah.
People
and christenings.
Christenings.
Name days.
Name days, christenings, weddings, like, these were fashion parades.
Yeah.
Like, you know,
100%.
Mercedes-Benz Fashion Week has got nothing on an ethnic Australian wedding.
Or just church. Church at Easter time. It was like, you know, you would be literally seeing all the designer catalogue.
Exactly. Yeah. And I remember my mum would buy a new outfit for every occasion, and she would, remember events?
Oh, yeah.
Events was a big fave. And I was just like, oh, Mum, I love your fake Givenchy turned event suit. And she had this sort of short, like, very Kris Jenner now haircut.
Yeah.
Big pearls, like big clumpy earrings. And my aunties all had oh my gosh, my memories of my aunties and looking at their photos from the 80s with like the high-waisted spray-on jeans, like big hair.
Yeah.
I remember they had this Revlon shade of pearlescent pink nail polish and the big claws, gold jewelry, this sort of natural effervescence and friendliness, you know. There's something about, and this isn't just for Greek Australian women, I think Italian Australian, Lebanese Australian, Maltese Australian, that sort of European sensibility. There's something very glamorous about European Australian women, but they're very, they carry also, themselves.
And they take a lot of pride in their appearance. That's certainly how I grew up, to the point where I almost rebelled against that at some point, because it was like, oh, it's not just all for show, but obviously I've gone and deferred to it because I obviously appreciate, like you, all those nostalgic references to it growing up.
That's it. And there, you're right, there was a sense of performance to other people in the community, and that was something that I didn't like or connect with. I guess, oh, we're at church, oh, better have a new handbag lest, you know, Thea so-and-so catch me wearing something twice. Like I did sense that as a little girl, and I didn't like that. I didn't like the somewhat keeping up with the Joneses, you know, keep a side eye. I guess in Italian the word is the la bella figura, the you know, what the beautiful deception, like what can you show to your neighbour that maybe isn't your most authentic self or that's behind the scenes. I didn't like that, but from a purely aesthetic perspective, holy
wonderful.
Moly, so inspiring. And it's something that, you know, I talk to my aunties now and we look at some of their old photos, and I'm now at the point where I'm asking them questions going, you know, for such a ultimately conservative and, let us say, sexist culture, how were you allowed to leave the house? Like, how did your dad let you leave the house in these big stilettos, these, you know, tight jeans? You were showing off your banging body, big hair, like you were no shrinking violet. And the sooner I started asking these questions, the more my aunties were saying that fashion was a form of rebellion for them.
Right.
And it was the clothing and the makeup and the hair that they embraced was a codified way that they could sort of tell their parents, F you, I'm a woman now. I'm not a little girl. My virginity is not something to keep in a box and to keep it, you know, in the...
As a prize.
As a prize, or in the context of community. And, of course, Madonna was the ultimate sort of Juzzy fashion icon in the 80s, and I think Madonna was a huge reference for that generation of women, and really inspired them to have the confidence to break free and, you know, give a bit back with their fashion. So it's very, very layered. But
and it is funny you say that, because one of the things that you do promote about your clothing is that enabling of self-confidence in wearing what you produce.
That's right. Yeah. And wearing, you know, fashion is ultimately, it's a language and it's a code, and it has its own syntax, and there's grammar and there's rules that you can break. But I think that no matter whatever makes up fashion, it really has to come from a place of you wear something that makes you feel good, and whatever you define as feeling good, that's all that matters. If you feel comfortable in anti-fashion, I guess the Jerry Seinfeld normcore, like just jeans, sneakers and a t-shirt, that's fine. You know, that's still a statement. You are saying, I actively reject the world of fashion and care not for it. That's an important statement too.
100%.
But there's nothing worse than putting on, I think there's nothing worse than putting on a mask or putting on a costume and it not coming from an authentic place.
And I do want to ask you about a sense of costume later in the interview, but going into Stav as a teenager, and I know that you kind of have a fascination with teenagers, or almost like it seems as if you have like, I feel like you have a responsibility to them with your work. But I want to get to know you as a teenager.
Oh dear.
And particularly you obviously honour pop art in your work.
Yes.
What were your like go-to pop culture references that defined you as a teenager, as you're starting to really kind of find yourself?
I was a self-confessed super nerd. Like I loved reading. I went to an all-girls school, so like socialising with boys was like, I'll just leave that till uni. So from year 8 to year 12, I was like, all right, I'm gonna sit here and learn and absorb. Like, this is what I'm here for.
Yeah.
And I really, I had a really great art teacher. Now that I think back, her name was Mrs. Muir, and she introduced me to the idea of postmodernism, and I felt very connected with that. I think the school curriculum in Year 12, the artist that most schools had to study was George Giddoes, and because I went to an all-girls school, she said, Stav, I think there's an artist that you need to look at called Frida Kahlo.
Okay.
And she introduced me to Frida Kahlo's work, and like so many people, I was just in love with Frida's sense of her sense of self, her portraiture, the surrealism, the way that she could sort of see her life through a lens, use the work to then reflect back certain points of her life. And I can't say that I think Frida's work was like a thing for me as a teenager, but I don't, even though I've taken on her name as my own moniker now, I don't love it anymore, but at the time it was crack.
And do you think that part of that, and I'm just speculating here, was a sense of representation, even though, you know, she's Mexican descent, you know, the ethnicity of a woman that didn't look like Linda Evangelista.
That's right.
But still in a beautiful artistic form, that's something you identified with?
Absolutely. And, you know, connecting with female artists was just, it was something that I wasn't really exposed to, you know. There weren't any female artists in my family.
Yeah.
All of my relatives became teachers, basically. Teachers or stay-at-home mothers or, you know, other sort of administrative jobs. So I really, in Frida, I saw someone that kind of looked like me, dark skin, dark brows, dark hair. You know, and I wasn't really seeing any other artists like that. And then with the pop art factor, you know, a lot of teenagers go through their Andy Warhol phase, and I was definitely one of them.
Yeah.
And now, similar to Frida, like, I find Warhol's work really detached, very cold now. Right. Definitely more of a Jeff Koons pop art gal. But at the time, like, you know, I read popism back to front. I watched his movies, which are, you know, very painful to watch, but I thought I was so dreadfully arty for sitting there and watching them. So, you know, I really became immersed in educating myself about art and my lineage before me, because I felt like I belonged with these people. I felt like they were family. Yeah. Maybe distant cousins or people that weren't related by birth, but there was something that would thread us together through time. And of course, you know, the pressure that I received from my parents in terms of career, because when you're a teenager, this is when you're asking questions of, what am I going to do with my life? What will I do when I grow up? What will I do for money? And, you know, my fiscally responsible Greek parents, at Careers Day, they encouraged that I become a financial advisor. To which I was like, no, I want to go to art school. And they did not approve of that. Right. Said, you have to go to university.
Even your dad with his kind of musical rebellion.
Yeah, even my dad. They would have been quite happy if I had gotten into finance or become a real estate agent. Or I think they.
I could see that though.
Yeah, I can really see me selling houses in a caftan.
Definitely a point of difference.
I was mad at them. I was really mad. I'm like, hang on, how can you enable someone to be themselves? And then it's like, all right, enough of that, enough playing. Now's the time when the real world sets in and you have to give all that up. And I really struggled with that idea of, hang on, well, some people have made a career out of this. Why shouldn't I? Yeah. And their response was always, it's hard. Yeah. And inside myself, I thought, well, it's hard to be good at anything. If you want to be the best garbage person in the world, you have to be the best. Like you have to have a business acumen. It's not the job, it's your mentality.
Yeah. And certainly I know, again, from my own upbringing, I remember saying to my mum as a teenager, I'd really love to do fashion design.
Oh,
but
forget about it.
I was bright enough to do lots of different things. And my mum was like, well, you're not you know, you're creative, but you're not that artistic, and it's hard and a difficult industry. So find something that's probably a little bit more predictable. Yeah, exactly. That you can fall back on and can make a future for yourself out of, which. So I did, and I came to fashion as a second career in my life cycle.
Me too.
Yeah, but it's, you know, I don't blame her for kind of trying to gear me in that, but those kind of ideas do really steer you away as a teenager when you're trying to form your own identity. And
when you're scared and not really knowing, do I take the plunge and quote unquote, you know, be my best self, or do I fall for a second-rate version that I know I can do? And as you said, you know, if you have the marks to have options, then you can do other things. 100%. I could have studied medicine, I could have done law, but I chose not to because I didn't want to.
So were you like being an arty, you know, teenager and being influenced by all these things are a little bit deeper than probably most teenagers, you know, sitting there watching Warhol films. Was there a darkness in the way you represented yourself as you became a teenager to kind of represent that arty student, or
Look,
you still bright and out there?
I wouldn't say that I would never use the goth word, but I discovered op shopping.
Right.
And that for me was, I mean, op shopping isn't inherently dark, but I think in about year 11 and especially year 12, like vintage became, that was it.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't want to, if my contemporaries are all wearing like Supre, rah-rah mini skirts and off-the-shoulder crop tops with slogans from Big Brother, like Sarah Marie or something stupid, I was like, I want to wear a beautiful 70s rayon wrap dress with snow boots and a cameo necklace. And, of course, I came of age in the time of Sex and the City. So, you know, Carrie Bradshaw mixed and matched vintage, and that was okay. So,
and you had the very fortuitous opportunity of working with Patricia Field, and I was going to say to you, that's like a teenager growing up in the 90s, working for Patricia, if you loved fashion, that's like a wet dream.
That's it.
How did that happen for you?
Well, after high school, I studied a degree of arts and media. Okay. So my original plan was to become a journalist and to, similar to yourself, work in publications and, you know, maybe join the fashion team as an, you know, assistant, you know, shining shoes and whatever it took to, quote unquote, work up the publishing ladder. And at the time that I was studying media, this little thing called the internet blog started to explode, and I saw the writing on the wall and just went, oh my God, journalism's dead. Yeah. Like, this industry will not be sustainable in the long term. And I worked at the student newspaper, and I did a film elective, so I actually found my way somewhere in between doing sort of copywriting and freelance writing work and very low budget, terrible film costume design and styling work in Adelaide. And I was lucky enough that I met a group of people who ran a street press. Right. And back in the day, before Instagram, you would pick up magazines that would, you know, show you where you could eat, where you could go to art galleries, where you could shop in a particular place. So I became the fashion editor of a street press in Adelaide called Merge. Yeah. And through that job, I had a very wonderful editor who gave me complete creative control, which I probably never had since until now. Yeah. And I built up a styling portfolio of shoots that were very much in my world. So those, if you look at those shoots, it's kind of like baby Frida. You can see it all there. Yeah. And I used those shoots to make a portfolio, and I sent Patricia Field's team an email. Right. I sent the pitch and said, you know, I'm coming over to New York. I wasn't, but I just said that I was. Yeah. Here's my portfolio. I'd love to come do an internship. And to my surprise, they wrote back and said, sure, when are you coming here? And so I was like, oh, crap, like now I have to go.
Well, you have to go.
Yeah, like, I mean, I was expecting to, you know, receive nothing. It was just one of those, put it out there, see what the universe holds, and I got a response back. So I did go, and I did an internship for 2 months there in 2010 at this point. And I stayed with my mum's cousins in Flushing, Queens. So I had the like...
That couldn't be any more fitting for you,
I
given
know,
your
right?
nanny references.
Totally. So I lived in Flushing with my uncle who and my auntie who were Greek Americans. So it was like getting in touch with my American Greek family and seeing how the culture worked on that side of the pond, which was spookily similar. You know, working with Pat Field and her team during the day and doing anything from working in the shop and, you know, merchandising stock. And because I was an intern, all my work was fairly unglamorous, but it didn't matter. I was there. And at this point, the Sex and the City 2 movie was about to come out. So because the shop had a celebrity clientele that, you know, I'd be like putting clothes back on the rack and, oh, there's Drew Barrymore that's coming into the shop. And
it was in... was it the Lower East Side, her store?
That's right.
Yeah,
it was on. It's on the Bowery, so right in the middle of Lower East Side, Chinatown. It was very much that, that Broadway, just American dream.
You were there in 2010,
I think. Yeah. But it was great, and it was an eye-opening experience. I can't say that everything was great about it, and not just because it was hard work, but I definitely saw a side to the fashion industry that I wasn't prepared for. Yeah. And I'm very honest about this. It was a very bitchy, cliquey world. Yeah. And I had met some lovely friends that, you know, took me under their wing as the Australian implant, but there are a few people sort of higher up that were they did not like that this newcomer had come in, and I got the sense that their jobs were very on a knife's edge, and new blood met competition. Yeah. And they actively would sort of tear people down around them. And maybe it's my good old-fashioned, you know, Adelaide girl values, but I just remember thinking, if this is supposed to be the epicenter of inclusivity, you know, queer culture, exploratory fashion, it was just, it could be a very unwelcoming place at times too. Right. And I made a mental note, and, you know, I really was thinking of moving overseas and working and taking my career elsewhere. Yeah. And I think because of my experience at Pat Field, I decided, you know what, I love Australia. Yeah. And isn't it funny how no one embraces it anymore? And I had the kernel. You truly have. Yeah, well, the kernel of the idea came to me then, that just went, you know, why is Australiana a thing of the 80s? Like, what are people running from in Australia that, you know, they go to places like London and Paris, and yes, they pursue opportunities, but there's an active quashing of Australian culture, symbols, spirit. You know, there's something really lovely in parts about our culture, our casualness, our friendliness, our the way we open up and sort of have a chat in public places with strangers. I mean, that doesn't happen in the States for sure. People are like, are you trying to rob me? Why are you talking to me? Especially in New York. So that was where this idea sort of started there, and me thinking, you know, if I ever started my own label, I would do it in Australia, and I would not want to do it here. Yeah. So that was really important.
And so you've started your label, and obviously the kind of Australiana aspects to it come with a great sense of joy and nostalgia, as we've already talked about. But there is this level of joy and happiness to your work, and you're also very funny. Like when we were organising our interview, just even in the written word, you can feel your humour. What I want to know is, with all the bright colour and all the lovely joy that you kind of bring out to the externally to the rest of the world, like a comedian, comedians often have a darker, more sinister side. Is there an element of that to you? Or
absolutely. I mean, you can never just be a one-note person. And yes, of course, I have a dark side, and you know, I mean, as with anyone, I go through bouts of extreme anxiety, and not that I would say it's crippling or that I sort of say that I suffer from anxiety, but at times we all do. Yeah, sure. And luckily I have a very supportive husband who's really, really a great friend who can go, this is not worth stressing about. Like the word stress, and I love that he taught me this. Stress is when you're not in control. Yeah. So do whatever you can to get in control and you'll remove the stress.
Yeah.
Like just be on top of things, get the right information, especially when it comes to things like fashion production, which is just, it's the pits. Like it might seem really glamorous and fun, but most of the time I'm talking, to fabric people and managing customers and packages gone wrong and all this stuff that's like, I'm sending something to America that's maybe got $600 worth of clothing. It's gone missing. Yeah. Following up with the insurance. Do I remake another one? How long is it going to take to get, like, stuff like that? The logistical side of things can be overwhelming.
Yeah,
but
sure.
In terms of a darkness, like, I do have a darkness, but I choose not to really show it in my work. Yeah. And I also have an alternate art and drawing style that I do purely for myself that I don't share with the world.
Right.
Because it's black and white and it doesn't involve colour.
I figured that there would be something artistic in you that wasn't as bright. Only because you obviously are a thinker and someone that has that depth to kind of deconstruct something.
That's right.
And I think that comes, with that can come, I don't know if darkness is the right word.
No, I know what you mean.
Contrast.
And maybe something that's a bit more subtle and introverted and moody. I mean, I can be an absolute moody bitch from time to time. But also there's this thing that I have really struggled with, which is the notion of brand consistency. And as soon as you begin a brand and you create your language and you go, right, here's the symbols, here's the colour palette, here's the world. Yeah. It's almost like you create, as a designer, you create your own prison when you make that world because you make it, you can extend upon it with different product lines or different methodologies or executions. But ultimately, if I switched from producing very bright pop art symbolic printed caftans to abstract and Demula Meester-esque knitwear, even though it's something that I would feel like I was into, it would not make sense from a brand perspective.
And you've come to be known from an Instagram, social media perspective as someone that does truly live your brand.
I do, because it is just me.
But there is an element almost of costume to it, and your brand also has quite a strong relationship with drag. So you've got RuPaul alumni wearing your clothes. You've got this lovely relationship with the Imperial Hotel, which is obviously known for its iconic drag shows and being the opening scene in Priscilla. Is there a time where that sense of like the hair, the makeup, the bright kind of costume element to you, will we ever find you in black activewear or a grey male tracksuit?
Absolutely. And I generally am traipsing around the suburb where I live. I'm not afraid to not wear makeup or to not dress like myself.
Yeah.
That part of me, it's still me. Activewear, top knot, just hungover, like dark glasses, no makeup, no colour, like of course. And it's not something, it takes a lot of work to, curl your hair and do your makeup. And some days I just can't be asked. Yeah. And I'm totally at peace with that. Yeah. But some days I can. And, that's what's been really tricky with COVID now. It's like the opportunity to dress up and to take a stroll and really own your space and your body and be in the world. It's taken away now. And I definitely, I'd never just curl my hair and put on makeup and wear this at home because there's no need to. There's no point. I'm definitely, I understand how my style could come across as a costume, but it's not. It's absolutely not a costume, and it's maybe my references come from costume. So obviously vintage and sort of Hollywood costume of the 40s and 50s is a big subconscious influence that maybe isn't that obvious when you look at the work straight away, but it's there. Yeah. Looking at beautiful films like The Women and Joan Crawford's beautiful turbans and like the jumpsuits and the flowing fabrics, and that's a style that I really love. But at the same time, who has time to dress up like that every day when we have to be 5 things to 10 million different people in modern life. It's just not practical.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I know it's hard to believe, but I am a practical lass deep down. Hence why a kaftan's such a practical shape. It suits everyone.
Well, that was one of the things I was going to ask you, is that you do design shapes that fit most bodies.
Yes.
And you, in that way, your work is your design work is very inclusive. And I want to know, was that, you kind of like to break a mold. You like to you've disrupted the fashion industry somewhat, in that you haven't necessarily gone down the path that other fashion designers in the Australian environment would have gone down.
Absolutely.
And yet, as I said, almost anybody could wear your clothing happily. Was it an intention to be inclusive in your design work?
Absolutely. And it was that was from the beginning, really. And I find that good design should solve a problem. And for me, the problem was what to wear in summer that wasn't high-waisted hot pants, shorts and a singlet top that was all you could really find in Sydney at like general pants and, sort of quote unquote mainstream shops, or sort of frilly like lover-esque dresses. Like that's it in terms of the Australian market. And I really find dressing up for Sydney's humidity in summer quite difficult. Yeah. Like, it's hot, you know. You want to, if you're sitting at a desk during the day and you go meet some friends for a drink after work or for dinner, like, what can you wear that will suit sitting down in an office, or maybe, working as a waitress and having leggings and jeans, or wearing with heels? Like, what is a garment that can be multi-purpose, that purposely hides the body or doesn't cling to it? Because let's face it, some days you just don't want to have something that clings onto you, especially in that heat. And, I'll get real with you here. Like, I was like, I want to wear something on my period. Like, when I feel bloated and when I just feel awful and I want to hide and just go, I just want to wear a big fabulous sack. Yeah. And I said that out loud one day and went, hang on, a fabulous sack, a glamour sack, like a big potato sack, but that has some element of fabulosity. And so I started mucking around with textile designs for these sorts of big, loose-fitting, doesn't fit the body at all shapes. And what I didn't realise was that I was falling in love with these sorts of silhouettes because they allow for more graphic prints. Right. And sort of a few years later, when I did my activewear and swimwear, I really found having smaller physical area space of fabric a huge challenge to design textiles for. I'm like, hang on, what do you mean I don't have 3 meters to play with? This is difficult. And I can't say, I don't think I'll make any more swimwear or activewear because I just didn't enjoy the textile process. It's an interesting point because your canvas has gone from earrings to clothing to larger scale installations and artwork, even to food. So, like you've done a collaboration with Chin Chin and they've had a menu that has been dedicated to you. What canvas is next? Is it Las Vegas? You've kind of... gosh. Well, look, I was thinking of opening up a shop pre-COVID. Yeah. And I had a pop-up shop last year that was really successful, and it was successful because I was able to meet people in the flesh and have a dialogue with people outside of the online world. And, when someone comes up to you and says, can I just say, this bikini, I've been looking for a flattering, fabulous bikini for years and you have solved my problem. Yeah. Thank you. As a designer, I feel, all right, my work is done here. People might not feel comfortable sending that online or commenting or even, sharing as a private message. But when you have a physical space, I think you have a two-way dialogue that's genuine, that's not controlled by an algorithm, that, isn't owned by Facebook. Let's be real. But I was thinking of doing a shop, and I'm really sad that now the whole world has changed and I'm not able to basically do the Fiorucci of Sydney that I was planning. That was, you know, neon color, fabric, accessories, clothing, and even bringing in bits and pieces from other designers as well.
Right.
So
Making Frida Las Vegas world. Is that was the plan?
That was the plan. So I really wanted to take it into a space that was very much top to toe. You could tap in at a pair of earrings or a scarf or something smaller.
Yeah.
And then if you really appreciated it and you connected with the work, you could go the whole hog.
Right.
But yeah, now, I mean, as with everyone, like those plans are completely thwarted, and I'm faced with extreme artist's block, just going, crap, what do I do? Like, I you know, my clothes they're things that people wear to go out, to be seen. You know, as you mentioned, a lot of performers love wearing my clothing.
You've had Katy Perry, Sam Smith.
Yeah, because they are, you know, the designs are so bright and colourful, and they're statement pieces.
Yeah.
You strut your stuff, you go to an event and you create a statement. Now, I mean, you can't really create a statement at home. I love when I see people doing fashion challenges in isolation going, right, I'm going to wear my wardrobe and wear it at home. But, I mean, I couldn't do that every day. And it's also, I don't think people have the disposable income anymore. You know, everyone's afraid of what's to come.
It's a challenging time where we can't predict a lot of the future. As I keep saying, you would just have to go week to week.
That's
or
it.
Day to day even.
That's it.
Yeah.
And, you know, artists are... I think a lot of people go, all right, artists, now's your time. The world is sad. The world is going through turbulence. We need you to lift us up with your vision, your inspiration, your gumption. And actually, I find it's like, guys, like artists are, A, we're all juggling multiple jobs, but B, you know, they're sensitive people. So we are feeling
the same.
You know, I'm not inspired to do anything at the moment.
Right.
There's no, as you said, my work is colourful and happy, and there's not a lot to celebrate at the moment. So it feels odd, but you know, who knows? Something that I was working towards, but it was still a long way away, which actually kind of ties into the health COVID space.
Yeah.
I was talking with the Women's and Children's Hospital in Adelaide about, I had this idea about making custom textiles for the Children's Hospital and doing sort of custom doctors' smocks and nurses' outfits and pillows and hospital gowns that aren't that sort of awful mint green that you look at and immediately go, oh shit, I'm in hospital. Yeah. Especially for little kids and and especially teenagers too, that are stuck in hospital sometimes for months on end. And I thought, wouldn't it be nice to be able to work with, you know, a medical hospital grade sort of fabric supplier and do an on-demand service where, as an illustrator and as a fabric designer, I could, you know, talk to a kid, they could give me a photo of their pet or something that they love or their parents or their bestie or something that really meant something to them. And then before they go into surgery or some sort of procedure, or they have a nurse that comes and looks after them, they put on that robe and they take away the visual signifier that you are
sick.
You are out of society, you are shut in and isolated in this place. Just something that humanised the hospital experience. So it's definitely left of centre and doesn't really fit into, like, you know, chin, imperial, performing. But I think there is a wellness aspect to colour.
But it doesn't, for me, it perfectly ties into who you are and what you're about in terms of your clothing, providing joy and a sense of personal attachment to the emblems of what you wear.
That's right.
And truly giving joy in a space that is a little sad and sometimes not that hopeful.
And it's something that, you know, it's quite an idea like that. I've done my research. I haven't seen anything pop up in the health space, but no. I don't think fashion is as frivolous as people think. Like it does have the power to change your mood, to change your state of mind. And, you know, if we're talking a teenager that's a 13-year-old that's in hospital who maybe comes from the country, their parents come and visit once every 4 weeks because they don't live in the city where the hospital is. And if there is a print on the curtains in their wall that maybe has got a symbology of their pets, their town, where they come from, what makes them happy.
Just brighten their day.
Yeah, what a I don't know how less frivolous and meaningful fashion can possibly be, and textiles really.
Yeah. On a brighter, more futuristic note, we've obviously referenced Nanny Fine.
My spirit animal.
Are you going to be Yetta as the 70-year-old Frida Las Vegas?
Oh my God, I'm going to be Yetta now. I'm Yetta now. I'm actually Sylvia now. I'm a 60-year-old nagging mother as a 34-year-old without kids. But to answer your question, yes, I will be. But God, she was just that show. Oh my goodness.
I was obsessed with it as a teenager. Her clothes.
Oh. And I think maybe, as you were saying before with Frida Kahlo, I mean, you know, you wouldn't... She was Jewish. Like, she didn't have blonde hair. She wasn't the sort of tan, blonde, Anglo role model.
Even though she was teeny tiny, she was still curvy as well.
Yeah.
You know, she still had hips, you know.
That's right.
She wasn't a straight up and down shape that most teenage girls can't relate to.
That's right. And she had the big hair and the sort of... that sort of European sense of the bombastic, glamorous woman, and seeing Fran's dynasty with Sylvia and Yetta and, you know, Aunt Frida and, like, their whole family. Yeah. You know, the genius of that show, as everyone knows now, is the costuming and how to compare them with the straight-lace, uptight, you know, Anglo-centric Sheffield family. Yes. And seeing how... glitter, gold, texture, big hair, sequins, feathers. Like, you know, that was the language of, I think at the time it was played for like lower class. That, you know, this is the lower class working family from Queens. And now we look at that show through a different lens and go, oh my God, they look fabulous. Like the Sheffield kids are boring. They, you know, they may have had the great house and the social pedigree, but everyone wanted to be the Fines.
Even in the lyrics of the credits, what is it? Everybody else is wearing tan. Yeah. It was such a perfect way to encapsulate that difference, wasn't it?
And Cece Babcock was such a, like, Celine poster woman. And her costuming was beautiful too. And she was a fantastic actress, Lauren Lane. But, I mean, Fran, she was a comedian and she was a glamorous comedian. And that was something else that I looked up to, and I thought, wow, isn't it great that you can be funny, but you can also have style? Like, what an interesting... you don't really see too many of those pop up in pop culture, well, at the time. But, you know, she was parroting her idol Lucille Ball, and she did such a great job of it. But, I love Fran. And watching The Nanny this year through the sort of lockdown April, May, June months was like a soothing balm of the soul. Just, take me back to 1990s New York.
Stav, thank you for bringing that sense of fun and joy to the Australian fashion market.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for coming here today and sharing your style story with me.
Thank you. I'm very pleased to be here. Thanks for asking me.
My pleasure.
Stav is a girl who cites Nanny Fine as her spirit animal, and it's not hard to see why. Between the big hair, her bold, brash designs, and her warm embrace of her upbringing and ethnic roots, she may as well be a modern-day Fran Drescher. That's not to mention her beguiling, sassy swagger or her quick wit. Oi! While her glittery exterior may come across as a kitsch exaggeration or a costume of sorts, Stav truly holds a deep personal connection to her designs and the way she expresses herself. Whether you be Katy Perry, an infamous drag queen, or just a foxy lady from suburbia, it's her shtick to promote self-confidence in all that come to visit the world of Frida Las Vegas. And it's Stav's style to make sure everyone's invited.